On today's show, we will break down tonight's game between the Maple Leafs and the Buffalo Sabres. We'll tell you our three keys to the game and play a little cosign, no sign as well. All that more coming up on today's edition of the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Leafs podcast, a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast hosted by myself, Mike DiStefano, and my co-host, Dave Morassutti. Today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app and use the code LOCKEDONNHL to get $100 of matching on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. What's up, Dave? How you feeling on a Thursday game day here in Toronto?
Feeling good. Like to see it's an interesting time, these games coming up, right, for the Leafs. And considering what happened to the Sabres the last time, this game, I somebody brought up like that game about there's like, so a team that's wounded right now. I'm like, yeah, that's true. But we've seen the Leafs in this situation many, many times before.
Yeah, like the Leafs, they've been here. And, when the Leafs play Buffalo, most of the times it does not go well, it feels. There was that one game where, was it Marner, Tavares, and Ryan O'Reilly? I think it was like O'Reilly's second game here or something. He ends up with a hat trick, and it was unbelievable. But outside of that, there's not a lot of like happy memories that I can recall from, with the Leafs and Sabres in recent memory. Seems like the Sabres have had the Toronto's number for a little bit here, but you've called it, man. It's going to be, if the Sabres are going to want to try and respond after losing 9-4 to the Blue Jackets the other night. Like that's the Leafs are going to get a motivated Sabres squad. You just know they are.
Yeah, of course. You don't lose a game 9-2 at home. Oh wait, no, the Leafs did do that. You don't lose a game like that and not feel like pissed about it, right? Like, and the fact is, that Toronto.
Did you hear Kyle Okposo post game?
I don't think I heard what he had to say.
So post game, like, because they were getting booed, like there was lots of boos. I think there was some, fire Granado chants, and Kyle Okposo basically said, like, honestly, it's warranted. The team played so bad. He said we played like crap. The team, it's warranted for them to boo us. They should boo us based on how the performance went. It was pretty. I mean, it's honest comments, I guess, from Okposo. And yeah, you gave up 9 on home ice to one of the worst teams in the league. Yes, people are going to be pissed about it. Remember how pissed people were in Toronto when they gave up, 5 goals through 2 periods? And then obviously Toronto came back and made it a game. Buffalo was unable to do that, obviously. So then it becomes a sticking point. Like if Toronto had gone on to lose that game 7-2 or 9-4, just like Buffalo, it would have been a much different scene here in Toronto if they gave up a 9 spot at home.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't, when you look at how everything has gone for the Sabres, like the Leafs have been in that position before too. Like they've lost a game like that. They've had their coach's name being chanted to fire. They want to fire the coach, right? And so with the Sabres, you totally get it, because this is a team that was supposed to take that next step and eventually be a playoff contender, and they're again trending in the wrong direction. But we also know that when the Leafs go into Buffalo, there's many aspects that come into play of why the Sabres play the Leafs a certain way. One, the Ontario invasion. I have seen it firsthand.
Mm-hmm.
I know.
You were at that game with the hat trick, actually.
I was. I lost. I proudly donated a hat to the cause. And like I've seen it with like in Buffalo. I know a lot of people who are Sabres fans and who are Buffalo sports fans that are just you can see it starts to take a toll, right? It's a very vibrant market. It's actually a very underrated market in the NHL in terms of viewership, right? And they I think it's just it gets to a point where something has to change.
Yeah, and I guess that kind of brings us to the next point here. Like, I mean, do you think that perhaps a change could be coming behind the bench soon? I mean, we've already seen 5 coaches get fired so far this year, and there's been some decent success with, I guess, the 3 coaches that were fired in season. Like Babcock is technically the first. That barely counts. That was even before, the season started, but he still counts in this, statistic technically. But you look at the other 3 coaches, like that, you look at what happened in Edmonton, Minnesota, and in St. Louis. And, those guys, those teams were able to, win some games afterwards. They did get that new coach bump and got them going in the right direction. It did not happen with Ottawa, however, last night. They ended up choking away that 3-0 lead we were recording, and then they went and they choked it away when we got off. But like Don Granato and the Buffalo Sabres, like they might be thinking, hey, coaching firings is like one of the lone things that a team can do if they're sputtering in the wrong direction and feel like they need something to change. It's not as easy to make a trade. Sometimes a coach ends up losing their job, unfortunately. And I think Don Granato is a good coach. He got a lot out of that group last year, but for whatever reason, the messaging isn't getting through this season. And I'm not sure what the problem is in there. Maybe we'll find out a little bit more tomorrow. But I don't know, man. You think he's on the hot seat?
You know what? It just all depends on what the organization's expectations are, right? Like they went to the season, everyone's talking about the 2 signings they made with Darlene, and then you get Owen Power signed. That's looking pretty good. You got Tage Thompson coming off, a breakout year. And then they go and they're like, we're okay with a tandem of, well, now it's three goaltenders now of Eric Comrie, Devin Levi, and Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. Like you have this, every team can have star players on the blue line, good players up front, but you don't have the goaltending. That's like the one area you just can't look past. I thought the same thing.
I mean, Toronto's gotten away with it for a little bit here. They've gotten away with some subpar goaltending. I mean, Aiden Hill. Who knew Aiden Hill and Logan Thompson were going to be all-world goaltenders who could lead the Vegas Golden Knights to a Stanley Cup?
Well, one thing that Vegas has that the Sabres don't have is a good core of veterans, right? Guys that can, like, you look at the guys who are kind of have to stand in as the leaders of this team. It's Kyle Capozzo, right?
Yeah.
He is the veteran guy of this group. There's not really anybody else. Everyone else is young and inexperienced, especially on that blue line. Like Eric Johnson was brought in. I don't see Eric Johnson as that leader type on that blue line, right? Like that's, in my opinion, that's probably the oversight there is they didn't, when the Leafs brought in Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, and Nylander, they brought in guys like a Patrick Marleau. They kept James Van Riemsdyk around. They kept Tyler Bozak around. They kept veterans around so that the young guys were kind of insulated a little bit here. In my opinion, the young guys in the Sabres are being thrown out to the wolves because they don't have that insulation right now.
Yeah, I think you can make that argument. I think you're slighting EJ a little bit. I think he means a little bit more in that locker room than you think. I remember when when they were in Colorado, like Eric Johnson had a lot of love from the players on that team when he was there and their families and the fans. So I'm sure he does bring a pretty solid veteran leadership, brings cup experience. People listen to that. But yeah, like you're not wrong. It's definitely a younger team. They skew pretty young. Their stars right now are all like sub 25 at this point in time. I mean, sure, Alex Tuck is getting into his prime age, obviously, and that's why I think it's upsetting if you're Buffalo where they're at. It's like this was supposed to be the year that we took our next step. Like you've got Darlene and you've got Tuck and you've got this Paterka kid who's kind of coming out of nowhere and finding some success. You've got Tage Thompson, who's 25, 26 years old. Like, he's ready to burst. And unfortunately, it just hasn't really culminated in as much success as they thought they were going to have. That said, I mean, this team, for whatever reason, does always show up against the Maple Leafs. So I don't think Toronto should be taking this team lightly. And like I said earlier, after taking a butt whooping like they did to the Columbus Blue Jackets, there's going to be a little extra motivation to make sure they come out on fire. Let's take a quick break. Let's come back, get into this matchup a little bit more, talk about our three keys to the game, play some cosign, no sign as well. But before we get into any of that, let me tell you about one of today's show sponsors. Today's show is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicles and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Guaranteed Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Welcome back into the Locked On at Leafs podcast. This is Mike DiStefano and Dave Morassutti. We're hosts here at the Locked On Leafs podcast, a daily Maple Leaf centric show. You can find our pods wherever you do download your podcast from. You can also find us up on YouTube. That's Locked On Leafs on YouTube. We'd ask that if you enjoy the content that we're providing, or you want to keep up to date with what's going on with the Maple Leafs on a daily basis, make sure you give us a quick subscribe so you can get that content directly to you each and every day, every weekday, Monday through Friday, when we put out new content. And the main content from today's show is obviously going to be a little preview for tonight's game between the Leafs and the Buffalo Sabres. The Leafs coming off that fluky loss to the Rangers 5-2, so they'll look to get back into their winning ways. They're 16-7-6 on the season. They've jumped into second place in the Atlantic Division, now 6 points shy of the Boston Bruins, but they do have a game in hand. They're taking on the Buffalo Sabres, 13-17-3, just 29 points on the season, which is good for 7th in the division. Not what the Sabres were hoping for. They've only won 3 of their last 10 games, and they're coming off that rough outing where they lost 9-4 to the Columbus Blue Jackets. I'll say this. I think if we're talking about some keys to tonight's game, it definitely is going to have to be to put pressure on those goaltenders tonight. And I'm not sure who's going to be starting in goal. I don't believe they've announced a goalie yet, whether it's going to be Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen or it's going to be Devin Levi. They both played in that game against Columbus, and they both gave up a whole bunch of goals. So they could go with either or to hope for that bounce back. But whoever the goalie is going to be, I think Toronto really is going to have to come out and fire on all cylinders and really, really, put pressure on these goalies, put pressure on that young defense, and get into the areas, the scoring areas where they can score. And I think that's going to be one of the keys for tonight.
Yeah, I mean, when a team gives up 9 goals, there's clearly, an issue there of keeping the pucks out of the net, and the Leafs have been putting the puck in the net quite alarming rate. They struggled a little bit at times against Igor Shesterkin. They still managed to get 2 goals in on them. I thought they were snake bitten, as you mentioned. It bounced, it didn't go their way. But this Leafs team has not had any issues putting pucks in the net, especially against teams that are not very good, right? You look at Pittsburgh, you look at Columbus.
Yep, they've averaged over 4, during this stretch of games of 15, 16 games here. So scoring hasn't necessarily been the issue. A lot of it's been, keeping pucks out of the net most of the time. So yeah, just they need to continue that, right? Like, the consistency has kind of been an issue for Toronto this season, but if they can continue with that game plan and follow through with it for a full 60 minutes, they should have some success here against the Sabres. And I think the first 10 minutes are going to be key too. Like we talk about them, the Sabres wanting to get off to a good start after just getting absolutely obliterated by Columbus on their home ice. They've got the Maple Leafs coming into their home ice, and you said it. It's often, like it's a road game basically for the Sabres inside their own arena. They don't take too lightly to that, I would think. So I think the first 10 minutes, the Leafs might have to weather a storm against Buffalo, but if they could do that, just play compact, just play well structured, and then have that counterpunch about halfway through and really take it to the Sabres for the final 50 minutes. I think that'll be a successful game plan for Toronto.
Yeah, I mean, just you have to come out with a purpose, right? Against the Rangers, they weren't playing to their game, maybe a little more reactive to what was going on. Against Sabres, you need to set the tone early and remind the Sabres where they are in the standings and where you are in the standings.
Yeah, but like I'm kind of saying the opposite. Not that they should hang back, but I'm
No.
saying is I'm expecting a lot out of the Sabres out of the gate.
Oh,
And they got to be ready for that. So whether that is, I guess, by setting their own tone or at least leveling up to make sure they're on the Sabres level and make sure that they are, staying defensively responsible. Like I think they get in trouble if they're out there and all of a sudden this turns into a track meet where they're like, okay, this is going to be a high scoring affair. Like we saw that happen last time these two teams played. The game ended 6-4 in favor of the Buffalo Sabres. And that's what happened. They tried to go out there and they tried to assert their dominance, but ended up becoming a bit leaky defensively by trying to cheat for offense, and that ended up biting them in the ass. And defensively, they were making miscues, if I recall, a bunch of turnovers in that game as well. But if you just play simple hockey, you stick to details, I think that'll be a successful game plan for the Maple Leafs. Try and keep it a low scoring win. Honestly, I love a 3-1 win by the Maple Leafs. I absolutely love when they can, have that type of win. The 7-0 wins every now and then, they're fun, they're fine, they're dandy and cool. But honestly, anytime you can get a solid 3-1 win where the team plays 60 minutes, they lock it down in the third period, don't give up anything to the opposition. That's where I think the Leafs are at their best. That's how you play playoff hockey, first of all. And not that you have to play a playoff style game against this Buffalo Sabres team because they're pretty young, they're kind of spunky. But to your point, put them in their place. Say, hey, you are the 7th place team in the division. We're the 2nd place team in the division. And we're going to show you the difference between that tonight. We're going to make you, I was going to say something kind of inappropriate, but, who's your daddy kind of thing. You know what I'm saying?
well, the one thing they can do is there's doubt, right? You've seen the Sabres kind of tune out when things aren't going right for them. They against Columbus, it was 4-1. Marchenko's here putting the puck between his legs to score goals on this team, and there was no response, right? The team, I hate to say the word quit, but they pretty much did quit when, because it only got worse from then on. So there's vulnerability there, basically saying if you get off to a good start, if you put doubt into the Sabres' mind, we've seen them mentally, they have struggled to overcome it.
Yeah, for sure. So that's going to be the game tonight. I'm curious though, is there someone who you're locked in on the Buffalo Sabres tonight?
On the Sabres side,
Or well, both. We'll go both teams. Like we'll go Sabres and Leafs. If you got a Leafs guy off the top of your head really quickly, I guess you could throw that out there. But
Austin Matthews, man, let's see this guy continue to put pucks in the net, and
yeah,
you got to hope he's chopping at the bit here to go against the Sabres. And then for Buffalo, it's whoever's in goal, right?
mm,
Whoever's in the net, who's the one that's going to step up and have give this team a little bit of belief that, you're not going to allow 9 goals, right? You're not going to allow those back-breaking goals.
yeah. Last time these two played though, Matthews did get a hat trick. He scored a hat trick in that game back in
Mhm.
November. So yeah, he's definitely gonna be someone to watch for sure in that one. I think for Buffalo, this I was honestly not even gonna lie, quite shocked when I saw the season that this gentleman is having. Do you know who currently leads the Sabres? Well, you're probably staring at it, but are you like the fact that Casey Middlestat leads the Sabres right now offensively? kind of blew my mind. Blew my mind. He's like third in the NHL in points at 5-on-5 this year. Casey Middlestat, he's having a breakout this year. Despite, what's going on in Buffalo and how kind of, bad it's been for them. He's been a nice bright spot for them. A former, top 10 pick who's finally panning out years later.
Yeah, I interviewed Casey Middlestat when he was doing this NHLPA event. So like I thought this was a guy that was going to be a building block for the Sabres, and it's taken time for him to be that for them. I'm pretty sure on Locked On Sabres they talked about maybe Casey Middlestat's a guy you try to trade while his stock is up, right? Because he hasn't had great seasons, right? Like as you said, this is a breaker. He had 59 points last year, which is not bad, but this guy's a top 10 pick. You have higher hopes for someone that you pick that early. So if teams are interested right now on the Casey Middlestat, guy who's 25, a lot of teams are looking to add young talent, and maybe a change of scenery gives him. I mean, he's playing well, but maybe he starts to realize a little bit more of that potential in the right system. Yeah, like Casey Middlestat did surprise me when I saw that it was him and Dahlin tied for the team lead in points.
Yeah, he's got like 27 points in 33 games. They'd be dumb to trade away
Of course.
Casey Middlestat. I mean, if I'm looking at the Sabres, I'm thinking, okay, yeah, they're having a tough year, but this is a team that's ready to compete. It's trading away 25-year-old second line players doesn't seem like the smart thing to do. Like, okay, he's got value, but guess who else has value? William Nylander. Are we looking to trade away William Nylander here in Toronto because he's playing well and probably has high value? No, I don't believe we are.
Depending on who you ask.
Well, yeah, I guess that's true. I suppose that is accurate. Joseph Woll. Are we looking to trade away Joseph Woll because he's playing well and has high hopes? No one. I got you on that one. Not one single person is willing to trade Joseph Woll in Leafs Nation. If you are, you're a sicko and turn in your Leafs card. That's all I'm going to say on that. Yeah, I think it'll be, it should be a good game though. Like Toronto should be able to win this one though, and get back onto their winning ways. And if they can get the win tonight, you pull to within 4 points of the Boston Bruins for the division lead. And, still a couple games left against Boston. So there's a chance that you win those games that you have still to play. All of a sudden, this is a tied division. And at least got a nice sked, little soft sked coming up here, right? Like you got Columbus on set. You got Buffalo tonight. You got Columbus on Saturday. Then you take the winter break. You've got your Christmas holidays, all that good stuff. You come back. You got the Ottawa Senators who are in a massive turmoil right now. And then I think you got Columbus again. And so your next 3-4 games here, a little cupcakey. You should be able to bank some points and try and climb to within these Boston Bruins, before the new year. It's possible that the Leafs could find themselves within, a point or two, perhaps be tied by the new year. What's Boston's schedule looking like, actually? You know what? Actually, save it. We'll talk about it in the next segment. Because we're going to do cosine, no sign, and it's coming up on the other side. Before, though, we get to it, I want to tell you all about one of today's show sponsors. It's our good friends over at Sleeper. A new NHL season brings all sorts of possibilities. Matthews could score 50 goals. The Leafs could hoist the Stanley Cup. And you can win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our number one choice for daily fantasy sports and especially daily fantasy hockey. Because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. All you have to do is pick whether studs like Matthews or McDavid or McKinnon or whoever will score two or more. Will score more or less than their sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, saves, plus, minus, and more in any given game. And to win 100 times your bet on Sleeper, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8 different player stats. You heard me, Leaf fans. You can win 100 times your bet by playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention and nail your picks so you can start winning big. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. Welcome back into the Locked On at Leafs podcast. Mike DiStefano and Dave Morassutti. We got a Leaf game tonight. Toronto rolling down the QEW and taking on the Buffalo Sabres. So it's the battle of the QEW tonight. We'll see who comes out victorious. Buffalo won earlier in the year, 6-4. We remember that high scoring affair. Matthews did get a hat trick in that game. We'll see if Toronto can get their sweet revenge. Coming off a revenge loss to the Rangers last night, so that they can try and flip the script on Buffalo, as Buffalo tries to flip the script on the Columbus outing they had the night before too. So should be two motivated squads tonight. Looking forward to it. That being said, we haven't played cosign no sign in a couple of weeks, I don't think, Dave. So why don't we play some cosign no sign today? And it's a pretty easy game for those who are new to the program. Basically, we're going to make statements to each other. If we agree with the statement, we're going to co-sign it. If we disagree with what the person is suggesting, then we're going to no-sign it. So that's how the game is played. Dave, present me with your opening statement.
Well, in theme of what we were talking about in the last segment about the Leafs' chase for the Atlantic Division with the Bruins, the Leafs will catch the Bruins for top spot in the Atlantic Division.
Co-sign, my guy. Co-sign. I thought we thought this was going to happen at the beginning of the year. We proclaimed that the Leafs, especially with that Vasilevsky injury, there was a path where Toronto could basically sleepwalk their way to a division title. And let's be honest, they are doing that. They haven't played their best hockey this season. They've been incredibly inconsistent, and they haven't had many big-time games. It's been maybe 2 games that they've had 60-minute efforts all season long, yet they're just 4 points out of the top spot in the division. If this team gets on a run, and this team gets rolling, and this team plays to their abilities for any stretch of games, like a couple of weeks here, they're going to steamroll through a bunch of teams, pick up a bunch of points, and end up on top. I truly believe it. I think they are probably the best team in this division. I think they have a chance to be, especially if they can get that goaltending. I guess that is the one question mark you have is, what are you going to get in net? But when you got Austin Matthews scoring 2 goals a game, and hey, that's what he's been doing lately. He's got 2 goals in 5 of his last 7 games, I believe is the number. Yeah, 5 of his last 7 games, he's scored 2 goals in each of them. So 9 multi-goal games on the year through 28 games. The guy is an absolute magician. So he can outscore a lot of those defensive and goaltending problems. I'll also mention, hey, the defense, that's not been healthy all year. You finally got Liljegren back. Eventually, you're going to get Giordano back. And you're going to add to this blue line at some point, too. And that's going to only help this team defensively. And I think when you put all of that together, you get everyone playing, into these new systems. Yeah, I think there's no doubt that this team finishes atop the Atlantic. I'll co-sign that all day.
The big one here for me is the Bruins got off to such a great start in October that I think it was like people were like, oh, the Bruins going to do this again. 8-0-1 in the month of October. PK was at 97%. They had a plus 15 goal differential. Since then, they've only had a plus 3 goal differential in November with a 7-4-2 record. Their penalty kill went down to 81.6%. In the month of December, they are 4-1-3. They have a even goal differential and an 84.6% penalty kill percentage. Basically, what I'm saying is the Sabres you saw in October, the Bruins you saw in October, that I think they were punching above their weight. They've come back down to earth a little bit here. And the Leafs have that's the opening right now for the Leafs. Can the Bruins get back to what they were in October? I don't think so, because there aren't many teams that can go on that tear that they went on in October. And I think teams are starting to catch up to them. Teams are realizing that the Sabres have flaws. I said, why do I keep saying the Sabres? Sabres do have flaws.
Bruins.
Bruins have flaws.
Well, the Sabres also have
Yeah,
flaws.
the Sabres have way more flaws than the
Yeah.
Bruins.
Yeah,
But the Bruins are
both these teams very flawed, and Toronto's a little flawed too. Let's not
oh,
act all high and mighty like the Leafs are a perfect team. There's flaws there as well. All right, so we're both in agreement. Toronto eventually will overtake the Bruins for the Atlantic Division crown. I also think there's also like a couple other teams that could potentially do it, like Florida, namely, could also potentially do it if they go on a run. But this is the Locked On Leafs pod, so we'll say that the Leafs are the team that gets it done. Mine for you, Martin Jones might just turn out to be the most important free agent signing by Brad Treliving this offseason.
oh,
And I
uh,
use the word important specifically, not best, but
right.
most important.
You know what? I will co-sign it because again, some might have seen it as like the Leafs signed Martin Jones, but
How did
this
you
is
see it when it happened?
I said, you know what? I liked it. I actually liked it. Yeah, people weren't happy about his numbers with Seattle and things like that, but I'm like, thank God the Leafs have a third goalie that's an NHL goalie.
Mhm.
Like they tried with the Aaron Dells of the world. They've tried with the Casimir Kaskasuo, Eric Schalgren.
Michael Hutchinson, ring a bell?
Yeah, Michael Hutchinson rings the wrong bell for me. But yeah, no, like that was the big flaw in kind of Kyle Dubas's plan was that he rolled with Matt Murray and Ilya Samsonov, two goaltenders that had injury issues, had inconsistent play. Thank goodness Joseph Woll showed he could play some NHL games because the Leafs did not have many third options, right? They were banking on, in a way, of Joseph Woll being able to play some games. This year, you could say, you know what? Is Martin Jones could clear waivers and you bring him up in a situation like this, you felt a little bit better about it.
So here's the thing though. Here's the thing. In order for this to be a confirmed statement and for this to become true, Martin Jones would have to become the full-time backup for the Leafs for this to be true. Like, I don't think this is true if he ends up reverting back to being a number 3. So you believe that Martin Jones will overtake Samsonov as this team's full-time number 2 when all 3 goaltenders are healthy?
The
Because if
thing for
not, how can you not have, like,
yeah,
Tyler Bertuzzi as the most important guy?
for me, it's Samsonov. He doesn't have. I don't know how much leeway he has left because they've tried rolling him out. Like we said, with Joseph Woll out, this was Ilya Samsonov's opportunity to kind of regain what he had lost in a way, right? We didn't see him as a starter anymore because Joseph Woll was playing better. You have a chance now to show that I am the better option over Martin Jones, and he hasn't done that. And to me, that's why Martin Jones, you play well, you should be given the opportunity to play, right? And I think for Samsonov, again, the Leafs are not tied to this guy. They're not married to this goaltender going forward. And I do think that's where Martin Jones can usurp him and provide the Leafs that stability as the backup because Samsonov clearly hasn't been able to do that.
All right. All right. Give me a league-wide one here, Dave.
Yeah. We will see at least one more NHL coach fired before the end of the season.
Mm. So right now, I'm guessing the only other coach that pretty well would be on the hot seat that would make sense is Don Granato. Outside of that, like who else do you think would be someone on the hot seat?
Well,
Like
I
we've
don't
already
think
seen 4 other coaches go, right?
Brenda Moore, I don't think they would do it
No,
in
no
season. I think
chance.
it's after the season. Um,
Lindy? Do they fire Lindy? Does Lindy Ruff? They fire him?
like that's a team that was supposed to be the top team in the Metro, and
Yeah.
they are among the bottom teams in the Metro. And this is not the first time that Lindy Ruff's name has been brought up as on the hot seat. There are fans chanting for Lindy Ruff to be fired. I think last year too, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, like after the first game, and then they were saying thank you, Lindy. Like not too long afterwards, they ate those words pretty quickly. But then they came back to it this year and like, no, 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 we were right. Fire Lindy. I'm going to co-sign it just because it's one of those things where it's like, if I say it's basically the field or nobody, I'll take the field that at least one more team will make some sort of coaching change at some point. There's a long road for another team to kind of hit the ditch and hit the skids here where they decide that they need to make some sort of change. So I'll co-sign it. We'll see at least one more. I mean, we've seen 5 in the first like 2.5 months. So I guess it is very conceivable that over the next 4 months there could be at least one more. So I will co-sign that as well. Co-sign, no sign, Dave. Patrick Kane is regretting signing in Detroit.
Big time co-sign. He had his pick of teams, and he decided to hitch his wagon to go. I think Alex DeBrincat had a big part to play in it. You're reuniting with a former teammate, similar to what happened with Terry Panarin and with the Rangers last year. Obviously, he had a bit of a say of where he went last year. He had all the say this time around. He had pretty decent teams interested in him. He had you heard the Stars were looking in. You had the Panthers who were interested. Even the Hurricanes were throwing their name in the hat. And he decides, I'm going to go to a Red Wings team that, yeah, they've been playing okay, but they're not considered a contender. They're not considered a playoff team right now. Even when he signed
Wow,
it,
they
they were
were.
on the bubble.
They were.
They were on the bubble.
Yeah, they were on the bubble, but thinking like Patrick Kane could put them over the top, right? And like remember how hot of a start they got off to. Like DeBrincat couldn't miss the
Yeah.
net. Larkin couldn't miss the net. Like those guys, the Detroit Red Wings got off to a really, really solid start. So I guess if you're Patrick Kane, if you started to think about what teams you want to roll with, and I mean he's got ties, within Michigan and he wanted to play in the States, obviously. I don't think it was a weird signing for him to go to Detroit, I guess. Um, but if you look at how things have transpired since he's gotten into the lineup, not great, Bob. They're 1-5-1 in the 7 games since Patrick Kane made his debut with the Red Wings. He does have 4 points, picked up 2 points tonight in a loss to who they played tonight. Anaheim? Did they play? I believe that's who they played tonight. Yeah, played Anaheim. So they or a couple nights ago rather.
They played
They
the
played the Jets. Played the Jets. So actually, you can bump that to 1-6-1. That 1-6-1 is the record since Patrick Kane entered the lineup. So yeah, not it's not going well for this group, and I mean, there's still lots of time for them to make a run here, but I would be curious, and I know this was a question that a lot of people asked at the time because yeah, to your point, like Detroit intended on making the playoffs. They're in the playoffs at the time of the signing, but it was always like, are they a cup contender? That was the bigger question. Like, can they make the playoffs? Yeah, I don't think it would surprise anybody. But can they be cup contenders this year? That's where it was like, that's kind of weird for Kane, who might just be in cup chasing mode. Maybe he's not, but that's what it felt like he should be at this point in his career. And for him to pick Detroit, that maybe is why it felt a little bit odd. But at this point, the way that they're going at that rate, things just aren't working out well. And I don't know, like if it gets to a point where Detroit kind of falls out of things, like I'm pretty sure they're out of a playoff spot now.
They're 3 points.
Yeah, would it get to a point you think where they trade him here? Like, if they're out of a playoff spot, let's say they're like 8 points out of a playoff spot come the deadline. Does Patrick Kane ask for a trade out of Detroit?
Well, he does have a no trade clause, so if they want to do it,
Well,
He's
now the no trade
so
clause is for his protection, so they can't be like,
yeah.
"You're going to Arizona for a 3rd round pick." Like, he gets to pick where he goes, obviously.
I think there could be, an opportunity here where the Red Wings are just like, you know what, we tried, didn't really work out. Let us know where you want to go, and let's see if we can make a deal. I do
Yeah.
think that's possible. I
Yep.
don't. I do think that they can retain salary if they need to make it work with a contender. So it's not like they're in a position where they can't use the salary cap their cap space to their advantage here. So yeah, I think that's very well possible, and or maybe Patrick Kane's just like, you know what, it didn't work. Maybe I'll stick it out, and maybe next year try it again, or he can very well decide whatever. I guess it's the tough part about it, but Detroit knew the risks. Well, not the risks, but they knew what they were getting into when they signed him.
Trivia time for you. How many names how many nicknames does Patrick Kane have, and how many of them can you name?
Oh my god. Well, I mean, Patty Kane is one. Showtime is like the most popular one that I know of.
Patty Kane isn't even on this list, first of all. So,
Showtime is like the most important one I know.
yeah.
I remember someone mentioning like
Don't
the
cheat. Don't cheat. Don't cheat.
there was one really odd one I remember. It had something to do with a bug, but I can't remember the bug.
With a bug?
Yeah.
Uh,
There was one about a bug. I just because like he was just like a guy that could get through player. Like I just remember, but like I don't know what bug it was though.
would you like to know the answer?
What is it?
According to Hockey Reference, and this doesn't even have Patty Kane on here, but according to Hockey Reference, he has 10 different nicknames.
10.
10. 10.
What?
A couple of these I had no idea, and why these are on hockey. Like, these might be so inside hockey, like inside baseball type nicknames that like only teammates know, and somehow they ended up on this website. So Kaner, obviously, we know Kaner. That one's like just like classic hockey. Add an R to the end of the name. Showtime, yes, as you said. Buzz, is Buzz maybe the bug one you're thinking?
Maybe that does sound familiar. Yeah,
Doc, like doctor, like Doc. Oh,
never
never
heard
heard
that.
that.
No.
Peekaboo. Also, Little Peekaboo.
What?
Also, yeah. Also, Peaks, along with Lil Peaks.
This is getting
And then
ridiculous.
you've got Kanye, like Kanye, but Kanye. And then Patty Cakes. Those are the 10 nicknames of Patrick Kane, according to Hockey Reference. The whole Peekaboo, Little Peekaboo, Peaks, and Lil Peaks. I where the hell that comes from, I do not know. Like, is his father's name like Peekaboo, like Peaks? Is that like maybe his dad's nickname? So he's Lil Peaks? Beats me,
Imagine
man.
saying this, being in the locker room and saying this to Patrick Kane, literally going, "Hey, little peekaboo, how we doing? How we feeling right now?"
That's what I'm saying. Like, I don't know, like Lil Peaks, like hey Peaks, like I can see Peaks maybe being a nickname, but like the full on just call someone Peekaboo. I don't know. I do not know. I mean, we did have a like growing up. I had a buddy. His family called him Boo. Um, his name is David, and they called him Boo for whatever reason. Yeah, no idea, no idea. Some nicknames you never know what the hell they mean. Anyways, that well, we conclude today's show on the nickname special from Patrick Kane because I just need to go and digest all of that information that I just read and shared with the class. Yeah, anyway, game tonight should be fun. Leafs, Sabres down in Buffalo. That'll do it for us here today on the podcast. I'd like to thank you and thank you all for listening and supporting the show, you can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all podcast platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on X at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at D_Morassutti. Follow the show as well at Locked On Leafs. Go ahead, leave a like and a comment down below on YouTube. That would be greatly appreciated. And we'll be back with another episode for you guys tomorrow to recap tonight's game. Leafs Sabres down in Buffalo. Go Leafs, go. Keep it locked. We'll be back tomorrow. Until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.